So thank you everyone for coming. Muito obrigada por ter vindo. So, hola, hello. My name is Joanne Ferreira. Chamo-me Joanne, or Joanna, or Jo. And I am the person who has the TT Portuguese website up and the Facebook TT Portuguese page. And this is just a cover of my academic book. So 190 years, 190 anos da presença madeirense em Trinidad Tobago. So welcome, bem-vindos. So we are dedicating this to our parents, our grandparents, and all our ancestors, our heroes of the sea. A nossa dedicatória, essa sessão está dedicada aos nossos pais, avós e todos os nossos antepassados, os nossos heróis do mar. And we are from Dr. 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐦𝐞𝐦 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐿, o diretor regional das Comunidades e Cooperação Externa. Dr. 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐦.
Olá, muito boa tarde. Antes de mais, gostaria de pedir desculpa por este atraso, mas estávamos de facto aqui com um problema no computador e, portanto, só conseguimos ultrapassá-lo com o telefone. Mas gostaria, antes de mais, gostaria de dar as boas-vindas a todos os participantes e parabentear a Joanne Ferreira, a nossa conselheira no Mar das Caraíbas, pela realização deste evento, porque é um marco importante, 190 anos da nossa presença no Mar das Caraíbas. Também, e uma vez que estão aqui presentes outros conselheiros, gostaria também de cumprimentar um cumprimento especial à Maria Sardinha, ao Maurício Cisne e ao João António Gonçalves, também nossos três conselheiros. Gostaria de cumprimentá-los e elogiar o grande trabalho que os três fazem, os quatro fazem com a Joanne, na promoção da Madeira, na promoção da madeirensidade, na proteção das comunidades madeirenses nos países de acolhimento e também pelo reporte que fazem ao Governo Regional continuamente. É de facto com uma enorme honra e profunda emoção que me dirijo a vós, em nome do Governo Regional e da Direção Regional das Comunidades e Cooperação Externa, nesta cerimónia que celebra 190 anos de presença madeirense em Trinidad Tobago e nas Caraíbas. Hoje não celebramos apenas uma data, celebramos o espírito dos nossos antepassados, a resiliência, os valores e o legado de uma comunidade que, em 1834, faz hoje 190 anos, embarcou no navio cetralhista em busca de um futuro melhor e que coragem e determinação encontrou nessas terras caribenhas o novo lar. Estes pioneiros, apesar dos desafios que enfrentaram, levaram consigo as tradições, a fé, a cultura da Madeira, deixando marcas indeléveis na história e no tecido social desta região das Caraíbas. A presença madeirense em Trinidad e Tobago e nas Caraíbas pode ser observada em diversas áreas. Na música, destacam-se as influências da viola madeirense e da breguinha, que contribuíram para os seus locais. Na gastronomia, as tradições do consumo de vinho Madeira, por exemplo, ou o preparo de doces madeirenses, que misturaram-se às práticas locais. Na religião, o papel essencial que os madeirenses tiveram na propagação do catolicismo e de algumas das nossas principais tradições religiosas. Também na cultura, na agricultura, na arquitetura e mesmo para a formação de nomes familiares que ainda hoje ecoam a Madeira em terras no Mar das Caraíbas, como o nome de Freitas, Quintal, Fernandes, Ferreira. Contudo, após 190 anos, muitos dos laços linguísticos e culturais foram-se perdendo. Estima-se que existam cerca, não sei, mas os especialistas, nomeadamente a Joanne e outros especialistas que irão intervir, poderão atualizar melhor, poderão dar-nos informações mais rigorosas sobre este número, mas de acordo com a nossa informação são cerca de 1.000 a 1.500 descendentes de madeirense em Trinidad e Tobago e cerca de 5 a 6 mil pelas outras ilhas das Caraíbas. Muitos já se perderam a ligação direta com a Madeira, mas a identidade e a herança madeirense continua a ressoar. É aqui que a incansável dedicação da professora Joanne Ferreira, conselheira da Diáspora madeirense nas Caraíbas, se torna fundamental. O seu trabalho na promoção da língua e na revitalização dos vínculos culturais merece o nosso mais profundo reconhecimento. Este encontro virtual é mais do que uma homenagem. É uma oportunidade única para revivermos as histórias que nos ligam, refletirmos sobre o impacto dos madeirenses nas Caraíbas e renovarmos os laços entre as nossas comunidades. Também é um momento para reafirmarmos o compromisso do Governo Regional da Madeira em apoiar todas as iniciativas que valorizem a nossa diáspora e fortaleçam a ligação às suas raízes. A preservação da nossa língua, da nossa cultura, das nossas tradições é essencial para manter viva a nossa identidade coletiva, a nossa madeirensidade. Permito-me ainda destacar a presença dos oradores deste encontro, o John Wayne Quintal, o David Pestana King e o Francis de Freitas, três descendentes de madeirenses, cujas investigações sobre a herança da nossa região enriquecem o nosso entendimento e iluminam o legado que queremos transmitir às gerações futuras. Deixo-vos com um desafio, que este momento de celebração também seja um ponto de partida para novas iniciativas que continuem a promover a união entre a Madeira e as Caraíbas e que inspirem outras comunidades madeirenses espalhadas pelo mundo. Termino com um profundo agradecimento a todos os que contribuíram para que este evento fosse possível, nomeadamente, e nunca é demais referir, a professora Joana Ferreira, e com a certeza de que o espírito madeirense continuará a brilhar, seja em Trinidad Tobago, seja na região das Caraíbas e em todos os outros países de acolhimento da nossa vasta e extensa comunidade que conta com cerca de 1 milhão de pessoas espalhadas pelo mundo. Um bem-aja a todos vós e agora estamos aqui para ouvir-vos. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Sérgio.
Bem, antes de tudo, eu queria realmente enviar as saudações das comunidades madeirenses que eu represento para todos vós e agradecer de uma forma muito sentida o de manterem a Madeira viva para esses países longínquos e que com este tipo de evento torna todas essas terras mais próximas da nossa querida região autónoma da Madeira. Nesse aspecto eu gostaria, como o Dr. Sancho já fez e muito bem, felicitar a professora e nossa ilustre conselheira, Joana Ferreira, por esta brilhante iniciativa. Não há dúvida que são com atos destes e com gente desta qualidade que a Madeira, realmente, sendo uma terra tão pequena, consegue ser tão grande pelo mundo fora. Bem-ajam. Quanto à comunidade de Trinidad Tobago, com este acontecimento também dão um exemplo para o mundo das nossas comunidades. Porque realmente 1000 madeirenses ou de origem madeirense que aí se encontram tão longe e conseguem dar este exemplo para todos nós. Não há dúvida que é com este tipo de organizações que a Madeira só lucra. E a Madeira, ao lucrar, lucramos todos. Porque há um desafio muito importante que está a ser feito. E eu aproveito também, e permitam-me que eu faça, de felicitar o Dr. Sancho pelo trabalho extraordinário que ele está a fazer. Ele está presente em tudo. Todos os dias nos jornais vemos conferências que ele dá e faz todo o sentido. Porque é uma coisa que temos todos que fazer, que é manter a Madeira viva nos nossos filhos e nos nossos descendentes. Porque o mundo hoje é global e se não fizermos este tipo de ações e outro tipo de ações que visem aproximar todos esses jovens da nossa terra, todo o trabalho que estamos a fazer será em glória. Felizmente temos personalidades, gente que nem vou citar o nome, porque há um nome que se cita e com mérito muitas vezes, mas já agora vou citar o nome dele, dizendo que há muitos Cristianos Ronaldos pelo mundo fora. Todos filhos da Madeira, que muitos deles que, de uma forma anónima, têm feito um trabalho fantástico em prol da nossa terra. Hoje, se a nossa terra é respeitada e considerada em muitos países e junto a pessoas com grande poder, tanto político como económico, deve-se também a todos esses anónimos e aos amigos da Madeira. Porque, felizmente, a Madeira conta com os seus filhos e os seus descendentes, mas também conta com um leque muito importante daquilo que eu chamo amigos da Madeira. Esses sim, para eles, o meu respeito, o meu obrigado por tudo o que fazem pela nossa terra. Eles não nasceram na Madeira, são madeirenses, têm coração madeirense, digamos assim, porque querem tê-lo. Portanto, para todos vós, eu envio, mais uma vez, uma saudação das comunidades que eu represento, mas também muito, muito obrigado pela honra que me dão de poder participar num evento tão importante como este. Bem-ajam. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigada.
Boa noite. Hi everyone. My name's Belinda Cipriano and I'm a proud conselheira of the Madeiran Diaspora here in Perth, Western Australia. Unfortunately, I can't be there live with you tonight due to the massive time difference. I know some may say we are at the beginning of the earth and some may say that we are at the end of the earth. Regardless of where we are though, Madeira will always be in our hearts. I'd like to congratulate my beautiful friend, colleague and fellow conselheira, Joanne, on putting such a wonderful event. I know whatever you do, it's going to be a huge success. And to my fellow Commonwealth friends, I'd like to finally wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas and a safe New Year with your loved ones. Boa noite e até uma próxima.
Em nome da Associação Dr. Robert Calley, do da minha família materna, Batista, da parte do meu avô, e Freitas, da minha avó, naturais do Santo da Serra, Ilha da Madeira, e no meu nome pessoal, saúdo a comunidade madeirense radicada no excelente e acolhedor país Trinidad Tobago, país que no início do século XIX foi de uma enorme generosidade em receber os primeiros imigrantes madeirenses e mais tarde, em setembro de 1846, acolher e acarinhar os refugiados madeirenses que aderiram à boa nova evangélica pregada pelo missionário escocês Dr. Robert Reid Calley. Uma saudação especial à professora Joana Ferreira, assim como aos restantes conselheiros das comunidades madeirenses nesse grande anfitrião país. Quero recordar algumas famílias oriundas da freguesia do Santo da Serra, Conselho de Santa Cruz, Mexica, Funchal, que estão ligadas à minha família materna por laços de afinidade e que se refugiaram nesse país em 1846 e seguintes. As que me lembro: Gomes Perneta, Andrade, Dias, Vieira, Franco, Ferreira, Reis, Gouveia, Lomelino, Vasconcelos e Fernandes. Saúdo-vos na paz do Senhor, com votos para que continueis a enobrecer esse grande país que vos acolheu e vos enobrece. Votos de um santo e abençoado Natal. A região autónoma da Madeira jamais vos esquecerá. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigada. Jacinto Claudio was wishing us all a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and that Madeira will never forget us. And we are a grand nation that welcomed Madeirans in times of stress. And he called a few names from the Presbyterian Church in Madeira and wishes us the peace of the Lord and the whole amazing refugee story, which we can read about in many books. And so, Jacinto Claudio, muito obrigada. Agradecemos muito.
Olá, Joan. I'd like to say greetings to everybody. Wishing everybody Merry, Merry, Merry Christmas, and waiting to see each of you in Madeira. We are busy. Let me introduce you to Carolina. Carolina is from the University of Madeira. We are busy studying the immigration in the beginning of the 19th century, specific in the case of South Africa, trying to see how important was the port of Funchal. On the other hand, the port of Funchal was a narrow port full of shipping going to everywhere in the world, to the British colonies, to the French dependencies, and also to the Caribbean Sea. We have to imagine an island which the Republic, the implantation of the Republic, which the economy was very, very, very low. The Republican times did not give to Madeira what was supposed to do after the monarchy system. And the principle of this Madeirensidad and the Union flag in Funchal. And we are busy comparing what was Madeira in the beginning of 19th century and what was the factors that will determine the leaving of the people to other destinies, particularly the Robert Kelly. Ralph Gonçalves, that you just mentioned, we met him here in Madeira. He came to see us in Madeira. And when we were in Santana, a photographer looking to me said, it looks exactly like somebody from this parish. In fact, his grandfather was from Faial, Borot of Santana. And to tell you, Joanna, that your contribution for the history of the Trinidad and Tobago has been extraordinary. And it is a great pleasure to hear you and to hear all the speakers about this subject. Because what is Madeira on the end of the day? Madeira on the end of the day is we together in the world, what we have done in the world. And what Carolina and I are busy studying is what was the factors that expose the Madeiran people, specifically in the beginning and in the end of the 19th century. In the end of 19th century, after 1880, to South Africa, and what was the factors that were determinant for these people to live, and which were the factors that was of attractivity of them to be received in another countries, and what is the influence of our culture in your culture, and what can we do together to preserve the roots and to preserve the integrity of what we call since the 16th century the Madeirensidad. So all your contributions are, on the end of the day, very important for the history of Madeira and for the history of humanity. Madeira was a very important point in the 19th century due to what I just said and to the links between the old continent and the new continent, between the Union Castle ships before the clip ships to the newest bow. I'll tell you a very, very brief story. On the 26th of November this year, I saw the navigators of the sea leaving the harbor of Funchal in the way of San Juan in the Caribbean. And I was following the ship. I was imagining what did these people suffer during all the trip. What did they? There was no communications in those days. That's what we have to realize, how big and how gracious these people were, and what is our importance in the countries. Therefore, we have another appointment. By the way, we have another conference just in 15 minutes or half an hour. But I would like to say thank you very, very much for you to include us in this with our small contribution. I hope to see you some other time, maybe in Madeira, and who knows, if not in Trinidad and Tobago, in another Christmas for the garlic pork sandwich. Merry Christmas.
Feliz Natal, muito obrigada. Obrigada. E Carolina, muito obrigada também.
Yes, thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
And força para seus estudos.
Boa tarde, eu sou conselheira, colega de conselho da doutora 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐦𝐻𝐿. É com muita alegria que venho participar. Eu não tenho muita habilidade aqui com o computador, mas até isto demonstra de que somos capazes de tudo, porque a professora 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐻𝐿 me convidou, também meu inglês é o que chamam de poor English, Então, peço licença a todos os que falam inglês aí, que estou vendo até o Manuel Alexandre, meu grande amigo, que também fala inglês, o Antônio Gonçalves, todos vocês, né? Nosso Gonçalo Nuno, que já falou inglês também, todos que falaram inglês. E como eu estou em Faro, no Algarve, eu não pude entrar, assim, da forma que eu gostaria, assim, com mais liberdade, né? Porque não domino as coisas e também o lugar onde estou, mas é uma alegria, fiquei muito feliz. Vou falar em português e eu gostaria até que um dia a professora Joanne organizasse alguma coisa aqui para a gente treinar um pouquinho de português, nem que fosse falarmos só bom dia, boa tarde, como vai, how are you, nem que fosse palavras pequenininhas. Ela, uma profissional tão linda de linguística, nos ensinar a dizer amo você, ou amo, não importa ser de Brasil ou de Portugal, mas que seja o português para dizer dessa memória tão linda que a gente tem com as Caraíbas. O Brasil tem umas ligações interessantes, porque iam daqui para lá, de lá para cá, e agradecer ao Dr. Sancho também por tornar esse momento único, porque estamos em todos os lugares do mundo, mas estamos em Trinidad e Tobago com os nossos ancestrais, que são mesmo nossos irmãos. Vi que tem um cardume também de sardinhas aí, então a gente vai aprofundar isso e que vocês, esses 190 anos, vocês percebam que, como dizia minha mãe, são só 2 dias. Foi ontem, hoje e amanhã é nosso para fazer essa unidade e essa madeirensidade cada vez mais próxima. Obrigada.
Obrigada e muitos beijos. A Maria
Se
Sardinha.
quiser, traduza para os colegas que não falam português, mas só desta vez. Depois cada um vai.
I'll just a little bit. Maria Sardinha is the consigliera from São Paulo in Brazil. She's currently in the Algarve, and she said 190 years ago was just a blip in time, not very long ago. Her mother always used to say there are only 3 days: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And she said even though she doesn't speak English, everybody here has to learn Portuguese, so that next time we speak in a bilingual way. And we can start off with small sentences, small phrases, and encourage each other. And she's a fantastic baker. She knows how to do bol de mel. She knows how to do broa. She knows how to do everything. And one day we'll ask her to give us classes online so we can practice our Portuguese and our cooking, and then we'll munch to our heart's content. So she brings all her love and her greetings from the Algarve, but she's from São Paulo with her family from Mexico. So we consider ourselves sisters and cousins and co-consiglieras because my family is from Mexico as well. So thank you very much. And this from Jacinto Claudio. Obrigada, Maria. Right now we're going to hear from Heidi. So Heidi is going to bring greetings from the Honorary Consul for Portugal.
Thank you, Dr. Joanne Ferreira. Good morning, bom dia. My name is Heidi 𝐄𝐲𝐿 𝐇𝐢𝐠𝐡. It is a joy to be here, and it is an honor to represent the Honorary Consul to Portugal, William Ferreira. Unfortunately, he was unable to attend, but he sent his greetings, which I will read now. It is with great pleasure that I bring greetings to the Portuguese community in Trinidad and Tobago on this special day marking 190 years of Madeiran migration to Trinidad and Tobago. I am particularly happy to do so in my capacity as Honorary Consul for the Portuguese Republic as a Luso-descendant as well. It all began when the Estrelista from Madeira left on the 12th of November in 1834 with 28 passengers, 25 males and 3 females from Quintal, Machico, Santa Cruz, Calheta, and Porto Santo, bound for Trinidad, arriving on the 7th of December, 1834. Since then, a number of prominent Portuguese made their mark and contributed significantly to the development of this country, including such great names as J.B. Fernandes, Ignatius S. Ferreira, Albert Gomes, Sir Errol dos Santos, and Bishop John Menz. The Portuguese were very hard workers and family-oriented and built many businesses over the years and excelled in sports, community service, politics, and many professions. I would like to pay special tribute to a legend who turned 96 this year, my father and past honorary consul for the Republic of Portugal, Ignatius S. Ferreira. His father arrived on our shores back then and ran a rum shop in Chagonas. Ignatius, at age 11, lost his father due to a sudden illness and made his way to Belmont to attend school there and later joined an expat community called Furnace, Withy and Company Limited. Career-wise, he started as an office boy and eventually became the owner of the Furnace Group of Companies, one of the largest and most successful businesses in the Caribbean. As a philanthropist, he created the St. John Ambulance Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and he presided as president of the Portuguese Association for decades. He is perhaps in a group of very few to have been honored by 4 countries: Trinidad and Tobago with the Hummingbird Medal, Portugal, Commander, Order of Merit, Vatican, Knight of St. Sylvester, and England, Knight of St. John. On behalf of the government of the people of the Portuguese Republic, I extend congratulations to all Portuguese citizens and descendants on this very important milestone and look forward to the bicentenary. From William Ferreira, Honorary Consul of Portugal in Trinidad and Tobago. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Heidi, and thank you to William Ferreira. And I would like to recognize Professor Emerita Bridget Brereton, colleagues Dr. David Rampasad, Father Mark de Silva of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Isabel de Carey, sorry Isabel, I think I spelled your name wrong, of Guyana and the Murray House Trust, who did a wonderful video presentation very recently about the Portuguese of Guyana. Roma Wongsang and Avril Belfort of the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, Joaquilina Ornelas from Madeira. I'm hoping that Professor Frank Fagundes from University of Massachusetts at Amherst can join us. Doutora Nadia Nunes, Universidade da Madeira. Rita Maria Freitas Luz with family here in Trinidad and Tobago. Professora Idalina, who has taught many of us. My colleague Vitor Paulo Freitas Teixeira. Another researcher, Robert Petrera, researcher and journalist, Eugênio Perejil, members of the media. I believe Anisto Alves from Trinidad and Tobago is supposed to be here as well. And everyone else from Trinidad and Tobago, from Guyana, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for any other part of the world, we welcome everyone. This is also in memoriam of Dr. Alberto Vieira of the Center for Atlantic Studies and the History of Atlantic Studies, and Dr. João Adriano Ribeiro from University of Madeira, who have been wonderful colleagues in the past, always promoting the history of Madeira and the links between and among the different territories where Madeirans have settled. I'm a senior lecturer in linguistics at the UWI St. Augustine, where I graduated from. I've been researching the Portuguese community of Trinidad and Tobago since 1988, and my family tree since I was a teenager or before that. I love Lusophonia, all aspects of it. I am the author of the book that you just saw and some other things. In terms of my Madeiran links, my paternal grandfather's family is de Freitas via Guyana and Ferreira, and my grandmother's family is Vieira Sabino on one side and the other is from Machico, which we have documented for over 20 generations, Vasconcelos Freire, Mendonça Perestrello, Gouveia, Escorcio, de Viveiros, etc. To our interesting family surprise, we also found that my maternal grandmother also has antepasados, ancestors from the Canary Islands, including Sosa el Portuguese, who had Madeiran roots. I am currently the conciliator or counselor for the Caribbean on the Madeiran Diaspora Council, and it's my pleasure and privilege to serve on that council and to be here today. So my contribution today is literally about contributions. I can't speak about everything that every single Madeiran and every Madeiran has done in Trinidad and Tobago, but I'm going to highlight a few things and hope that if you have any questions, we can have a question and answer session right after. Right, so there's this quotation from Camões. E se mais mundo houvera, lá chegara. Basically, this is saying if there was more of the world to discover, the Portuguese would have got there. Because the Portuguese, from long before they came to the Caribbean, have been exploring all over the world. And in our part of the world, we are considered part of the Madeiran diaspora. And Trinidad and Tobago is a tiny but important part of that diaspora. So these blue arrows point to just a few places of the Madeiran diaspora, especially the ones that are represented on our council. And we will talk a little bit more about Trinidad and Tobago's role in this whole diasporic movement. So this is another map of some of the communities, specifically in the Caribbean. We are here, this arrow right next to Venezuela. So Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and of course Brazil, all received Madeiran immigrants. But in the island chain, we have Trinidad and Tobago. We have St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts, Nevis, Barbados as well received some, especially Jews. We have Curaçao and Aruba, very important right here, and Jamaica and Puerto Rico. Basically, nearly every island has received Madeiran immigrants, but only some have received in great quantities. We also had in Martinique and Guadeloupe as well. And the French researchers for those territories have done some research on the areas. So a little overview of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to give an introduction and historical context of our history, of our migration, a bit about the socioeconomic development offered by the Madeirans and their descendants. And also a particular interest today is the Portuguese influence on national culture and society of Trinidad and Tobago. I wish we could talk about Guyana and St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Antigua and St. Kitts and Nevis, but we're focusing on Trinidad and Tobago today. And right after I speak, I'm going to invite Wayne and David to talk about contemporary Portuguese heritage and their experiences researching their families. Right, so this is a bit of our historical timeline. In 1834, as we know, the Estrelista came from Madeira on the 7th of December, 190 years ago today. Now, even before that, we had the Watchful, one of the boats, about 4 boats that came from the Azores on the 15th of July. If you would like to know more about the historical timeline, you can go to ttportuguese.com and you'll see the details of things like abolition of the slave trade and abolition of slavery and how that affected migrants and who came and such like. So these are just a few points. 1835, the Portuguese of Guyana came and resulting in over 40,000 Madeirans over time. Within the first few years of migration to Guyana, the first 3 or 4 years, about 12,000 Madeirans went to Guyana. So it's a very, very landmark year for the entire region because the majority of Madeirans did go to Guyana. Then in 1846, we had our big turn at receiving more Madeirans. So there was a bit of a gap for Trinidad and Tobago between 1834 and 1846. And 1846 was the big year when more boats started to come in from Madeira carrying 2 sets of people, Catholics who were looking for work, as well as the Presbyterians connected to Dr. Robert Reed Calley, a Scottish medical missionary. And this also links us to the history of Presbyterianism and Protestantism in Brazil, as well as Portuguese settlers in the United States, principally in Illinois and Hawaii. In 1905, we had the very first Portuguese association founded, and it was founded by Madeiran shop clerks and shop owners, people who were just looking to get away from the rigors of shopkeeping life and wanted to speak Portuguese and eat Portuguese food and sing Portuguese songs and just get together and reminisce about the homeland. And that was the Associação Portuguesa 1º de Dezembro. In 1927, the image below represents the Portuguese Club, which was a splinter group from the main association. because the association was driven by Madeiran-born people resident in Trinidad, and so Portuguese was the language of the association, but English was the language of the Portuguese club because the children and grandchildren were being educated and schooled in English, so they felt that they couldn't understand Portuguese, they couldn't read the minutes and the notices in Portuguese, so it was basically a breakaway group, and both are still around to varying degrees. And 100 years after the very first Azorians and Madeirans came to Trinidad, Alfred Menz, well, we call him Alfred Mendes. He's of the Presbyterian clan, and he wrote the very first novel of any Portuguese in Trinidad and Tobago, and definitely the rest of the Caribbean that I know about. He wrote a lot of other things, not specifically about the Portuguese, but I thought it was interesting that 100 years after the arrival of the first Madeirans, here we have a representation of Madeirans, both Catholics and Protestants, in Trinidad, written in English. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is why the then British Caribbean, we are no longer British, but at the time we were. And we have some simple responses. Of course, it's very complex, but some very simple responses would simply be treaties and trade. So there were two major treaties that Britain and Portugal had many centuries before. But in the 19th century, Madeira played a huge role in commerce, and of course, even before that, in slavery and sugarcane cultivation and so on. But in the 19th century, it was about trade because, as we see from the map, the route that many ships took from England stopped in the Azores and Madeira to stock up, to refuel. So what started off with trade, bringing wine and potatoes and, well, not potatoes, but garlic and other things, started off coming through Madeira. So there had always been ships. If we look at the Port of Spain Gazette, we'll see things like ships bringing all kinds of Portuguese goods here for years before, including during slavery. So different eras, as we mentioned, slavery, because apart from the 15th century Portuguese explorers and enslavers, over 50,000 Madeirans came to the Caribbean and Guyana in the 19th and 20th centuries as laborers, religious refugees, and later as fortune seekers. So as I mentioned earlier, Guyana received the bulk of Madeiran migration. So if about 40,000 people went to Guyana, a total estimated as 70%, they obviously had struggles at the beginning, but eventually to be a demerarista became synonymous with wealth. And that was a very, very important time in Guyanese history and Madeiran history, because the Madeirans started to do very well for themselves in Guyana. And there were actually plays, theatrical plays written about demeraristas having made their fortune in Guyana. Now, in recent times, to go to Venezuela or to South Africa was to make your fortune, but in that time, it was Guyana. So I put this in Portuguese because this says the wealth and the influence of the Demerara-based Madeirans basically molded or changed and shaped the history of the Madeiran diaspora of the 19th century. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're here today, that Trinidad and Tobago, well, Trinidad at the time, the two islands were united later in the 19th century, but Trinidad at the time was the starting point for these 190 years of Madeiran migration to these shores. So who came? Jews in previous times came, Catholics, Protestants, every religion that was based in Madeira came here, and from mainland Portugal came some Jews as well. The 19th century immigration was both legal and clandestine. Some of us have stories of our own fairly recent ancestors having been stowaways. My own great-grandfather, according to my grandmother, was just asked to take a parcel by a lady, asked to take a parcel to one of the boats for one of the departing boats, and he decided to jump on the boat and came to Trinidad. And he was met here by my other great-grandfather, And years later, their children married and produced my father, and who produced me. So it's interesting how these, over time, everything's connected back to the past. There was some retro migration of Madeirans going back to Madeira, not very much. And now there's an increasing move towards roots migration, where a number of Madeiran descendants are actually going back, quote unquote. We are from here, Trinidad and Tobago, but many people have found relatives have maintained contact with their relatives in Madeira. Some people have found recent contacts, and other people are just going to see what the island looks like, go into the archives, and some people are becoming Portuguese citizens in honor of their ancestors. So the basic historical push and pull factors. We typically associate the Caribbean with sugarcane plantations, but this is a very interesting scene from Madeira, where sugarcane factories are still in operation, where mel de cana, which we loosely translate as molasses or sugarcane honey, is very much part of their culinary history. So you have bolo de mel, you have broche de mel, you have lots of recipes with sugarcane products. And sugarcane cultivation in Madeira was very much connected to Brazil, and which of course affected the rest of the Caribbean ultimately, and the whole European. The historians among us can talk about those details, but I just thought this was an interesting image to share. So some of the push factors after the sugarcane went into decline in Madeira, later on the wine industry became important. But the time that's affecting us, there was a decline in the wine industry and the wine market in the 1840s because there were two major grapevine diseases that hit the Madeiran grapevines. And that, of course, led to issues in the production of the grapes and the wine. And then there were market issues, what was going on in the United States, which had become a huge importer of Madeiran wine. Then we had other things pushing Madeirans out, was serious religious conflict with the Dr. Cali and his followers in 1844 and 1846. And 1847 was the year of famine. That was the year that the potatoes, which had become really popular, 𝐂𝐸𝐿ias in Madeira, that was also causing massive hunger. And of course, in the whole scenario of socioeconomic issues and agricultural issues, there was growing unemployment for agricultural workers. The role of the aliciadores was an important. Who were these people? They were like headhunters. They would go to the poorer communities and offer great hopes of land in the Americas, great fortune to be sought. So anybody that they convinced to go to the Caribbean, whoever was employing them gave them money for each person that they managed to convince and recruit. So a loose translation might be recruiters, headhunters, that kind of thing, to make sure that people got on those boats and went to the estates in the Caribbean, came to the estates. Some of the pull factors, before all of this, there was the abolition of the slave trade. And when the Madeirans came, I should have put the 1834 part first, but in 1834, there was also the freeing of the enslaved Africans and the abolition of slavery. So the Azorians came before that, because 1833 was the act was declared, but it was implemented only in 1834. The Azorians came before the implementation and the Madeirans came after. So it's all the connections to slavery and the history meant that there was the former planters wanted to have people working on the estates. And obviously any formerly enslaved person in their right mind certainly wouldn't want to continue working for nothing or a pittance. And many Africans moved out to the towns, and we know the rest of the history with Portuguese, Chinese, and Indians coming in. And the end of the apprenticeship system also meant that more Portuguese and other ethnic groups, as I said, like Indians and Chinese, who had come even long before, were coming in. One of the other pull factors was family chain migration, where if one family or a member of a family successfully established themselves, it meant that they were able to sponsor or invite or encourage other family members, even neighbors and friends to come. So these are just some very general threads pushing and pulling people to leave their homes. So where did the Madeirans in Trinidad, where did the Madeirans in Madeira come from? The majority of them who came to Trinidad came from all over Madeira, but these are the principal towns. As you see, mainly close to the coast, probably easier to, all the ships departed from the harbor, Quintal. And so I did a little head count of some of the immigrants that we have a record of. The majority came from 𝐶 and we had other people coming from 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐦𝐞𝐢𝐠𝐡 here in the orange. Others came from Munt. Others came from Santo Antonio and Santa Maria Mayor. And I should say that 𝐶 and Munt and Santo Antonio and Santa Maria Mayor are all in and around Funchal. So it was mainly the parishes of Funchal that people came to, but they did come from other places. All right, so this is another view of the importance of 𝐶, Santo Antonio, and Munt, and 𝐂𝐨𝐴𝐦𝐻𝐿𝐻. So the others, as I said, there's a wide range, but these are the, we can safely say it's mainly Funchal and surrounding areas. All right, so let's look at very quickly at who came. The Presbyterians came in 1846, and by 1854, they built the St. Anne's Church of Scotland. So for Trinidadians, this is on Charlotte Street, and it was known as the Portuguese church for a long, long time. This is Dr. Kelly here, medical missionary who was off to China, but felt that his wife was ill, and there was always, the British were always going to Madeira to recuperate, and he took his wife to Madeira so she could enjoy the better climate there. And basically he ended up getting licensed as a medical practitioner in the Portuguese, licensed by the Portuguese Ministry of Health, or the equivalent at that time. And he preached and he established hospitals and schools and eventually a church, several churches actually. So this one here in 1861, so it's interesting that the church in Funchal was built after the one in Trinidad, but there were also chapels in Machico and other places. So other views of the church in Funchal and our church in Charlotte Street. So these were the Presbyterians. Many of them did not stay. They were invited by Baptists in the United States to settle on land in Illinois. So in 1999, the churches in Jacksonville, Illinois, in the US, they did this lovely quilt to show that everybody started off in Madeira and then went to Trinidad and then went to Jacksonville and ultimately Hawaii. So these are some pictures of the churches of Jacksonville where I met my cousin, Jacinto Claudio, and this is the 𝐶𝐲, famous stained glass window in one of our churches as well. So from the Catholic perspective, the Catholics, because the Presbyterians left 1,000 of them or more and went to the US, most immigration to Trinidad was really Catholic. So this church here in Munt, in Madeira, that's the patron saint of Madeira is Nossa Senhora do Munt. And the church in Laventille, Our Lady of Fatima at Laventille in Port of Spain, this lovely photograph taken by Liam Boudou. This became the headquarters of what we call the Laventille devotions for many years. But the celebration of Nossa Senhora do Munt from the 14th to the 15th of August, which is basically the Feast of the Assumption, was celebrated in Mount St. Benedict, as we see on top here, and with the newspaper clipping, and our Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, as well as other churches like St. Francis and Belmont, Rosary, and one of the other churches in Port of Spain. So massive contributions here from the Portuguese among the Catholics. So where did the Portuguese, the Madeirans in Trinidad settle? Well, as you can see from the map, they settled everywhere. I made this map based on street names and other places of interest to the Portuguese history in Trinidad. So the map, I can share it later with anyone online. I haven't shared it for a long time because I've been working on it, but it should be ready to share soon. So I'll let you know when. But these are some of these street names that we have in Trinidad because Princess Aldegonda, she came to Trinidad with her husband, her French husband, in the 19th century. And all these are surnames that former landowners or residents gave to their areas. And George Cabral was a mayor of Port of Spain. So he gave two names, George Cabral Street and George Cabral Circular. And the rest are names all throughout the country, from north, south, east, and west, except Tobago. So these are some of the surnames, and I say some because every time I share this, somebody says, my surname is not there. And that's okay because there are plenty Portuguese surnames. But these are just some of the Portuguese surnames in Trinidad and Tobago. And many of them have been confused with Spanish surnames. But, you know, Spain and Portugal were close at one point. Physically close, they still are. And this is a nice street sign, two street signs I got in St. James in Port of Spain. So just to summarize very quickly, the 12 main areas of contributions of the Portuguese of Trinidad and Tobago. We have the carne vinha, and we have many, many chefs who produce it every year. We have rum and rum shops. We had bakeries, linguistic landscape in terms of surnames and place names. Our first Trinidad and Tobago colonial secretary was Earl de Santos, first female pilot in Trinidad and Tobago, and the English official Caribbean was Isabella Ribeiro de Cabral de Freitas. Yes, that was her name, all of that. Our first chief minister in 1950 was Albert Gomes. We've had carnival designers, contributions to calypso and steel pan, and sports and arts and literature. So I'll just touch on a few of these things. So in terms of socioeconomic development, business and politics, we highlight a few pioneers in business. There are many. One of them was mentioned, Ignatius Ferreira, by his son William. We look at people in the national art forms, and by national, of course, we mean Trinidad and Tobago. There are many, many more. So this is a bit of a disclaimer in each of these categories, plus numerous clerics, artists, musicians, educators, professionals in every imaginable sphere. And we've had a couple infamous ones, but for the most part, the average person of Portuguese descent in this country may claim no fame other than to have been solid citizens and patriots of Trinidad and Tobago. So we look at a few of the publicly outstanding ones, many of whom have had national awards bestowed upon them. So this is a typical consulate form, a registration form that many immigrants in the late 19th to early 20th century, they registered themselves at the honorary Portuguese consulate in Port of Spain, and they walked away with this, and the stubs were kept by the consulate. This is my great aunt, my grandmother's aunt actually, and Granny kept it because Titia, this aunt of hers, came to visit her brother in Trinidad and just never went back to Madeira. Her brother was the one who was a stowaway. In terms of socioeconomic development, many people associate, of a certain generation, mine and older, will associate the Portuguese with the typical shop, the Portuguese shop and the Portuguese rum shop, and we have quite a few artistic representations of the Portuguese in Trinidad, and this one was Alfredo Cavallo, and you can see the Portuguese shopkeeper here, and his wife, and the people coming in to shop, and all the dry goods and other parts, and somebody here drinking in the corner, a little alcohol there. This is a nicer one, I think, by Louison. He himself was a Govaya on his mother's side. Here he's holding the bacalhau in his hand, and we have Madeira wine. So the shops were normally divided into the shop side, which is the grocery with dry goods, and then the rum shop side. So this one was Teixeira. And so you had punch and rum, regular rum, Madeira wines, and then here you had salt beef, smoked herring, pigtail, the bacalhau, and brooms and all kinds of things, and the scale to weigh things on. And this one was called the Vasco da Gama Bar, with the Portuguese shopkeeper here, and people having a great time imbibing. So this is one of the interesting things that I found recently online. So Manuel Augusto da Silva, he owned a number of shops in Trinidad, and he was one of those retro migrants, as they call him. He went back to Portugal, specifically in Lisbon, and there he produced, between Madeira and Lisbon, he produced the Vinho Velho da Madeira, the Mimosa, and had it shipped back to Trinidad. And 𝐿𝐻𝐾, he was the manager of the 𝐂𝐸 businesses. 𝐂𝐸 also contributed a massive statue of Our Lady of Fatima to Mount St. Benedict, our monastery here. And so while he left, the Luge family stayed, and one of his nieces, Rita Maria Luz, she sent me this picture for all these connections. So this is actually online, so it was nice to see one of the old labels. So Madeirans mainly got involved in groceries and rum shops, but then sometimes you had a different business, like Madeira House, where things were sold representing Madeira, silver, and all kinds of artifacts and handiwork and artisan work. One of the main pioneers of his time, JB Finance, very famous for all his rums and his standardization of rums and labels. He became famous for having owned the Country Club and the Queen's Park Hotel. And right now, his memorial trust still operates, supporting communities worldwide, based in New York. Some of our famous politicians were Errol dos Santos, as I mentioned, our first colonial secretary. Albert Gomes was the chief minister, and Ferreira, who has written 2 books, including his experience working in Portuguese shops that his father had him work in when he was a child. And he has a lot of memories, still very much alive in his 90s, and as sharp as a tack. We can't mention politicians in the Caribbean without Ralph Gonsalves. He's not from Trinidad, but he does have interest in Trinidad. He has family connections here. We're not claiming him, but we're claiming him as a Caribbean man. And he is the longest serving democratically elected state leader, probably in the world, but definitely in the Caribbean since 1979. So for some people, some businessmen use their businesses as platforms for politics, as we know, and some use their businesses as platforms for more social and cultural work. So very quickly, we'll look at some of the contributions in culture and society in all of the arts, literature last, but we look at the national arts. So in terms of our national art forms, we had Eduardo de Sá Gomes. He was from São Pedro in Madeira. Henry de Freitas was born here, and Eduardo de Sá Gomes, right here in this picture, he was responsible for many recordings of our calypsonians like Caressa, Attila, Roaring Lion, and Executor. It's a very, very important figure in the world of calypso. Si pate pou papa comme calypsonian, c'est vive malewe. Sa gomme sauve yo, sa gomme sauve yo. Si pate pou papa comme calypsonian, c'est vive malewe. See those songsters walk in the street, nothing to eat and nowhere to sleep. They are malnutritions, those that I see, those who came to New York City. Sa gomme sauve yo, sa gomme sauve yo. And Henry de Freitas, he supported people like the Mighty Sparrow and was a producer for many years. Of interest to everyone who may not have been around in 1947 or may have forgotten, we have this, was actually called the Portuguese dance, and a very groovy little tune. And it was the 1947 Road March. And so you can imagine all of Port of Spain chipping to the sounds of Vishki Vishki Boy, Vishki Vashki Boy, Boy, Boy. So that was one of the interesting things that was produced. While the music is
you know, see a boat in the jumping water. I jump on a bar with the very number to break down there. Say, with the crash, after picking below you, when the boatman is through you,
Basically, in case you're wondering, the singer who was King Pharaoh was imitating how the Portuguese spoke. In terms of carnival figures, Harold Saldana is a national awardee for carnival development. He was called Sally and very well known. And Geraldo Vera was more recent, but also seen as a technical pioneer of his time. Little Touch of Madeira, a kiddies carnival band produced by Monica Ferreira. And this is the photo was given to me by her husband, John Ferreira. Husband, I believe. Hope I got that right. So in terms of other people who have contributed, so there you see the little Madeiran outfits. These are all little Trinis dressed in Madeiran costumes. They came from the Portuguese community. And you can see the little, the typical Madeiran hats with the air flaps to keep you warm. Short roll call for designers. We have a ton of carnival designers, including those of Portuguese descent. The Cavallo family has produced Farid, Glenn, and Peter. Kita Caraya, Sean de Freitas, Monica Ferreira, Edmund Hart, Lara and Monique Nobrega, Sally Saldana, Chris Santos, who recently got awards, and father and son, Geraldo Vera and Geraldo Vera Jr. Also involved in other realms of carnival were Sherry-Ann Coelho, Shane Correa, Joanna Ferreira, Kenny De Silva, Glenn De Souza with the Moko Jumbies, Annalise Ferreira, Denise Gomes, Helen Humphrey, Noel Quintal, Bjorn Rosendi, Michelle Xavier, and of course the Walcott sisters, who have been beautifully gracing carnival for many years. So John Ernest Ferreira, he invented the double second and double tenor steel pans and was finally recognized for his achievements many years later. He grew up in pretty much Cobo Town, as it was called, and has many great stories of running away from home to learn how to beat pan. National sportsmen and sportswomen. The most famous is probably Jerry Gomez. We can agree to disagree on that one, but at least he's the first one I know who got a stamp, a whole stamp, in his honor. And an article was done on him, recognizing his Portuguese connection. Other people in cricket included Steve Camacho, our recent Joshua Da Silva, Earl dos Santos, Larry, Randy Gomes, Sheldon Gomes, all from the same family, and Jerry Gomez. A short roll call again for sports. I'm sure that there's some names here. The ones in bold are the national figures who won awards. Others are pioneers like David and his archery. Frothy De Silva, he's living in Madeira now. Boise Neves started Portuguese Magnolias. Manny Pinheiro and netball, major figures. And we have all these figures in a range of sports. So I won't call out all the names, but you can see, and I want to highlight here Herman Rodriguez, who in gymnastics, who people really don't know much about his contribution, and I think we'll be writing about him soon. So just to end off, these are books and some chapters in some books produced by people of Portuguese descent writing about Portuguese themes. We have Charles Rees or 𝐂𝐲, Alfred Mendes and all his writings, 5 books, Albert Gomes, Monica Pestana. This is a story, has a story about the Portuguese, a chapter here about the Portuguese. My books, Elizabeth Nunes, who recently died in the States, and Ferdy Ferreira. So if there's anything you want to know about the Portuguese in this country, this little library here is actually quite helpful in understanding some of the background. People have been interested in us too. So Miguel Valde Almeida in 𝐿𝐻𝐾𝐻, or he was at 𝐻𝐾𝐻 at the time, wrote about us in one of his chapters in da Cor da Terra. The journalist Ferreira Fernandes, he produced a documentary and a book on the Presbyterian Portuguese specifically, and that's Robert Cali there, as you see. And Vitor Paulo Freitas Teixeira, he is here right now. He did his master's at the University of Madeira on emigration to Trinidad. And recently we had Francisco Corte Faguns wrote 2 chapters on Albert Gomes, Alfred Mendez, Olga Cabral, and Elizabeth Nunes. So we apparently are a point of interest. So to end off with the food story, as again, these are some of the foods that we have here. This is linguiça in the style of linguiça vinha d'alhos. This is carne vinha d'alhos in preparation. This is sanguíches or sandes de carne vinha d'alhos. This is vinha d'alhos again, milho frito, bacalhau, malassadas. Recently, pastéis de nata have become more popular. The cebolas de escabeche. We call this Portuguese thyme in Trinidad. There's more garlic pork again. So you can see that the carne vinha d'alhos and garlic pork are quite dominant. And then the tremosos, which were very popular in the past, which might be making a comeback in tapas restaurant. So this has nothing to do with anything, but I just thought it was nice to see the peão in Madeira looking just like our tops, spinning tops that I grew up with as a child. So our communities across the globe can learn from each other. So just ending up with this picture with Coraya's rum and Fernand's brandy. And we will now hear from our presenters on their experiences in researching their family histories. So that is it from me. Thank you. Viva Madeirense. Wayne Quintal, John Wayne Quintal, he has a BA in Urban Geography and Urban Studies, University of Toronto, and of course is a good UWI graduate with Proud Pelican with an MSc in Planning and Development. He is a professional land use planner in the state sector, and now he's in current private practice. He does a lot of volunteer work in the sport admin at both the local, San Fernando and other areas, and national levels, and in community development. Wayne's grandparents came to Trinidad and Guyana in the late 1800s from 𝐶, Munt, and Calheta. His ancestors are Quintal, 𝐄𝐲, Sardinha, Teixeira, Jardim, da Costa, de Jesus, da Silva, and de Nóbrega. And we can read it in our Trini pronunciations. Wayne is the leading researcher and writer on Madeiran descended families in the San Fernando area in Trinidad, including earlier and existing linkages. And he's used historic government and church records, oral history in the form of elderly, the elders having been recorded in family discussions, group photographs, and he's visited Madeira in 2010, which he'll tell you about. Wayne's Quintal family tree dates from 1659 in Caniço and 𝐶 in Madeira.
Good day, people. My name is Wayne Quintal, John Wayne Quintal, known as Wayne. And I am speaking about our family history and linkages with other Madeiran descended families in the San Fernando area, Trinidad and Tobago. I must mention that I've had strong inputs from my cherished daughter, Gabriela and Rosa Quintal, who is in Canada right now. And in terms of a forward, so what I'm saying here, this presentation is prepared by a Trinidadian who was born in this country and whose parents were also born here. Our family is proudly Trinidadian, and they are also proud of and interested in our earlier Madeiran history. The kind of things I'll be talking about will be the spatial context, family locations in Madeira and the Caribbean. I have something on a family tree, earlier socioeconomic profile, some selected photography, and current linkages in the San Fernando area. In terms of spatial context, this is a bit similar to what Joan illustrated earlier on. So we have the central illustration here shows the move from Madeira to Trinidad, and I'm saying Trinidad, now it's Trinidad and Tobago. It changed, it was linked to Trinidad, I think, in 1889. So I will speak, when I say Trinidad, I mean Trinidad and Tobago, so people will understand, please. That's the way we speak down here. Interestingly, Trinidad and Tobago has an area of 5,000 roughly square kilometers, and Madeira has 7. So 700. So Trinidad and Tobago is about 7 times the size of Madeira. That is an interesting little statistic. So we're talking about the British Guyana, Suffolk, and Roman Catholic influence. We have a strong Demerara, and I say Demerara because that part of British Guyana is of particular significance to at least the people in the San Fernando area. And I would mention that my mother, who was born here, would have referred to her mother as a quote unquote a Demerara Portuguese. And that's not meant to be derogatory or anything like that. The more polished way of saying it would be Portuguese, but we colloquially speak about a Demerara Portuguese. And so my maternal grandmother and grandfather were Demerara Portuguese. Interestingly as well, and you'll see from some of the names and their origins further down, many of the San Fernando immigrants were from Suffolk. And Joanne used the expression family chain migration, and I suspect that would have been important in our area because these guys very often knew one another from Madeira before they came here. And we were almost entirely Catholics because we came essentially from around 1890 right up to around 1920. Joanne might be fine the closing date on that. But my family was more around 1890. So we were essentially all Catholics in the San Fernando area. Next slide. So linked to that, this is a photograph of the front of a prayer book, a Portuguese prayer book that belonged to my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and printed in Lisbon in 1869. So I still have this here right now. The front cover has disappeared, and the pages, the edges of the pages are gilded. You know, you see the tint of gold on it. And she had, and I will speak in the vernacular. My grandmother, we call her Ma Sarina, right? She was originally Teixeira from Calheta. I touched on that just now. And she married John Sarina from Guyana, from Demerara. So she had some dates and names written in the back of the prayer book, but at the time these things got faded and not really too visible. Yeah. So why San Fernando? San Fernando was the second major urban area in the country, and it is more or less still is, although the build development has spread, you know, beyond. Just like Quintal, you know, you have Mountain and other places nearby, Suffolk and so on, that they merged into one another. It's the same kind of thing down here. And there was strong transportation infrastructure and port influences. You had already at that time, you had the railroad running from Port of Spain to San Fernando. All our shipping has been and still is essentially on the west coast, which is the easier coast. The northern and eastern coast in particular are rough and not suitable for anchorage and for ports and so on to ship it. So we had the transportation infrastructure, we had the influences of the port, and I will mention that my deceased paternal grandmother, Auntie Hilda, she's saying that her father, 𝐿 Quintal, again I use the expression 𝐿 Quintal, 𝐿 Quintal, and I'll talk a bit about him later on, used to take the train to go to Port of Spain to get merchandise for his shops in San Fernando. Then we had the surrounding agricultural economy. John mentioned the importance of sugar. That was a big thing all that while, up until just probably about 20 years ago. And also cocoa and coffee, but that was as you get further out from San Fernando. And then the influence of the oil industry, which was just starting to rear its head in Trinidad in the late 1890s and beyond that. And the Point-a-Pierre Oil Refinery, which was established in the First World War, was a major international refining center. So these are the things that encourage these guys, in my thinking, to come down to the San Fernando area, to come to Trinidad and come down to the San Fernando area, because the oil industry was mainly focused and is still mainly focused in South Trinidad and San Fernando is in South Trinidad. And then there is the significance of linkages among families from 𝐶𝐻. And Joanne spoke about family chain migration, and I'm pretty sure a lot of that was at play as well. So this is just, this links to the previous one. So you see where San Fernando is the oval shaped in the southwest corner, and Port of Spain is due north, a red hatch, which was the major capital region, but San Fernando essentially is around 40 miles from Port of Spain. That'd be about 60-odd km south of Port of Spain. And then there's Tobago in the corner there, but Tobago is really about 22 miles to the northeast of the northeasternmost point of Trinidad. Next slide. All right, so family locations in Madeira and the Caribbean. So I'll speak about both sides of the family. On the Quintal, because all the records that I have show that the name was Quintal. And in Trinidad, it changed to Quintal. And I've seen records of 𝐤𝐸 Quintal in the San Fernando Borough Corporation records, where his name is spelled Quintal. So he would have gone there and they asked him his name, and he said Quintal. So the guys wrote it down with a K. So I wonder if he had said Quintal, what would have happened? He would have confused them even more. So essentially, the name has been used in Trinidad all around since these guys came. It's Quintal. Anyway, so our earlier records, and I'll show you something just now, is that our Quintals came from Caniso. I think John said that's the correct pronunciation. And we have records to show that Francisco de Quintal came and got married in 1806 in 𝐶𝐻. And that's where our arm of the Quintal started in 𝐶𝐻, right? And then 𝐤𝐸 de Quintal, he lived in Madeira until 1892. And he came to Trinidad in 1892 and stayed there just for about 15 years. And he lived in Port of Spain, in the northwest part of the country, where most Madeirans went. And then he moved to San Fernando in 1907 until he died in 1943. But in between, he had re-migrated temporarily to Port of Spain, to the Woodbrook area. And we have photographs of them around in the 1920s in I think it's Petra Street, either Petra or Anna Street, and it's the Trinidadians among us will know. And where my old aunt, who was born in 1909, was a schoolgirl there and went to attend the church of St. Teresa's in Woodbrook. Then the 𝐶𝐸 side, so woman Quintal was married to Georgiana 𝐶𝐸, and she came to Trinidad in 1895. And well, then when she got married in Port of Spain in 1899, and then she and her husband and a few children already at that time came down in 1907 to San Fernando, and she died in 1946. On the old lady's side, again, I'm being colloquial intentionally. On my mother's side, her father was John Sardina, and he and his wife, Ma Sardina, came to Trinidad in 1905. We don't know if John Sardina was born in Demerara or in Madeira. We know he spoke the language, but that doesn't mean to say too much, really, because they have been down there for so long. But he died in 1935 in San Fernando, and Ma Sardina, my maternal grandmother, Francisca Sardina, who was known as Francis Sardina, she left Caleta in 1890 and went as a little child with her godparents to Demerara, never to see her family again after that. These people in those days lived what could be called a rough life, right? So a young girl, about 7 years old, never to see her family again. And some of her family we have pictures of some in New York, Brazil, and in South Africa, but she never saw anybody again. So she came to Trinidad with her husband and 2 kids in 1905, and she died in 1963 when I was 10 years old. So I remember her quite well. And as a matter of fact, I will mention that she is one of the few people I remember talking to me in Portuguese. I was around 7 or 8 years old at the time, and I was doing something dangerous. And she called me, and she said, "Anda Pekin," right? And that's the only time I remember her talking to me in Portuguese. And we had another family on the paternal side who was Bella Gomes. But my mother used to pronounce it Gomes. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anybody in Madeira. We in Trinidad say Gomes, but they already pronounce it Gomes. And she was back and forth to Madeira, and she's the first one that mentioned the proper pronunciation of 𝐶𝐶 to me, and I could picture her now telling me that before she died in the Martin, probably around 20 years ago. So some of the early Madeiran families in the San Fernando area. There are several names here. I don't think I have time to mention all of them, but we have the Freitas's Claudio Cavallo, Antonio Pizarro, these were prominent business people. Manuel Nunes Xavier from Current, just outside San Fernando. Jacinto Xavier, who left San Fernando, went to Chaguanas and then to Port of Spain. 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐦𝐿𝐴 and Candy Cici, Candido da Silva, Joaquim Magalhães, Freddy Quintal, Joe and Daniel. Daniel was a cousin that came down here, never married. Ernesto Gomes, who had a prominent rum shop in San Fernando. John Sabina, my maternal grandfather. John Menz, and it was mentioned that Father Menz, I think John mentioned it earlier on, who was a prominent Catholic priest in Trinidad and Tobago, and he moved from the Faisalad area and came to San Fernando area and had several businesses in San Fernando. There's Relva, Joe Relva, and his name will come up later on. Francis, it's wines and so on. There's the Danjads from Current again, from St. Charles, just east of San Fernando. De Oliveira, Frederick de Oliveira, and I remember him, he came here in 1927. Albino João, and that surname came up before. He would have been the grandfather, prominent Trinidadian cyclist, Jean Samuel. And then there was Farina, de Souza, de Luz Rodrigues, and Antonio Fernandes. And 𝐶𝐶 turns up, you would see quite often in this listing here. And forgive me if I leave out people. All of this was done in the last few days. Joanne will attest to it. But these are the names that come easily to mind and from searching my records and so on. Yeah, so those are the more common and popular names. And I'm seeing people in our audience with similar surnames. You never could tell, you guys might be related somewhere along the line. I'm seeing Paulo Teixeira. My Teixeira was from Caleta. And you know, I'm seeing the Freitas and other names as well. The 𝐂𝐨𝐦𝐬𝐿𝐴, which I remember one of my friends here saying that when the old people came to call her father, they lived in Mokwako Street at the time, her grandfather, and this is the pronunciation she repeated to me. They would say 𝐷𝐾𝐲. That's how they call them out from the front of the property. I don't know how familiar that sound is to our Madeiran people here. Yeah, okay. This is probably not too legible, but it's a very important thing. It hasn't been typed. This is information I got from someone who contacted me about 25 years ago, who I believe is now deceased, because I've tried to contact him several times. Rick Brown, he at that time was an engineer in the States, and he, through the Church of the Latter-day Saints, had researched the Quintal family ad infinitum. He sent me a booklet, a binder here with a whole lot of information in Portuguese and spreadsheets in Excel and a whole set of family tree information. And the significance of this particular one is that it shows when Antonio de Quintal married Isabel de Souza in 𝐂𝐸 in 1659. And then he proceeded to show all the linkages after that, straight down to his arm of the Quintal family and our arm of the Quintal family. So I don't know how many people have family tree information dating back to 1659. I suspect this is very rare in Trinidad, and if so, may perhaps exist in perhaps one or two of the old, what we call French Creole families, prominent French Creole families. But this is tremendous important to us. And then the next slide, please, John, is where he kind of delved down, he came down to the first one that came from 𝐂𝐸, from Sawantu, pronunciation might be off, and he was Francisco, and he married Antonio Joaquina in 1806 in Sahok. And then after that, we have their children on the row below, and then their grandchildren, and João de Quintal turns up on the right-hand side, the second to last cell on the right-hand side, and he was born in July 6, 1873. And this guy is amazing, all the details that this guy presented. All his woman Quintal's brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews with the exact date of birth and all that kind of thing. And I will let you know that when I went to Sahok, I met some Quintals in what we will in Trinidad call a parlor, a shop. And one of the guys there, he called his son who spoke English because he lived in England for a while, young guy. And when I pulled out these things and showed them, they came with their cameras and they in Sahok, Madeira, were taking photographs of stuff from me, a humble Trinidadian, and they were seeing family names that they could identify with. But all thanks to Rick Brown and his group. Early locational and economic characteristics of these guys, Joanne touched on some of this. They were located mainly in what we now refer to as the central areas of San Fernando. San Fernando was much smaller at the time. Streets, for those who could relate to it, like Coffee Street, Mokuapo Street, Broadway, High Street, Ponapera Road, as well as in Corinth and St. Charles. And I mentioned those adjacent areas earlier on. They were into bakeries, groceries, rum shops. Now, for those in Madeira, the term rum shop is a very common and familiar term in Trinidad and Tobago. It's a bar. We call it a rum shop, right? And the Portuguese people who excel in operating rum shops, several in our family. They were hotel owners, they were property owners, landlords, they were into furniture and biking enterprises, and Claudio Carvalho, who was my mother's godfather, is significant in that regard. Importers and distributors, and this will be Antonio P. Sorrell, Pereira Sorrell, was big in that in San Fernando. And then those who owned owners, a lot of them were clerks in Portuguese retail establishments. And I can think of Frederick Mendonca as well, who came in 1927. Now I'm trying to be fast because I'm running for over 20 minutes already, so you all excuse me. Culinary traits, where we speak about gallop pork, which is our expression in Trinidad, and which is a big thing, still a big thing at Christmas time, and it is becoming more and more of a national dish, if I can be bold enough to say that. Can vin de olives. The pickled onions, the cebolas that Joanne speak about, which we still do. My right daughter and myself, we still do pickled onions right through the year. I'll probably have some later on for lunch, with my lunch. There's garlic soup, there's malasada, is that correct pronunciation, which I understand was very popular at Carnival time. There's cabbage soup and buljol, and my own aunt, Thelma Sarina Smith, mentioned with eggs when I interviewed her, because when I interviewed these old family all around, I kept written records, so I can dig back and see when I spoke to who. And interestingly, in terms of the garlic pork, and we're talking about people who came here, let's say, in our end of the family, 1890s and so on. I was privileged as an ex-alumni of the University of Toronto in Canada to have been invited to submit a recipe for a booklet that was produced in 2021. It's called The Table We Share, and it's recipes from all over the world, alumni. And I did something on garlic pork, which my daughter Gabriella put it into the proper culinary language with quantities and specs and that kind of thing. But which unfortunately, when these guys did some summary, they cut out some important things. But nonetheless, I think it's important that 110 years afterwards, we have Trinidadian people writing things on garlic pork in prominent documents after it being with us for over 100 years. All right, so some photography, right? To the left of the side, a portrait view is Old Man Quintal, that's 𝐂𝐸 Quintal, right? And that photograph is around 1940. He was supposed to be getting ready to go back to Madeira for a visit. He had never been. And then the war came. And that was it. And he died in 1943. So that was it for him on Madeira. And the other photograph is his wife, a short lady, was Georgiana, and her son Joseph and daughter Gloria, and probably around 1930. And these are two photographs that I particularly like. The family photograph is my mother and her family around 1924. And my mother, Rosa Sardina, at that time, is in the back row. If you're facing the photograph, she's on the extreme right with the long hair. And her brother to her right was Uncle Sonny, Uncle Manu, we call him Manu. I never knew him. He left Trinidad in 1924. This photograph was intended just before he left. Never to come back to Trinidad. He went to New York, stayed by some of his maternal uncles. And then in front of him, sitting is John Quintal, who came from Demerara, as you said. So on the one on the right-hand side is Ma Sardina, my maternal grandmother. And this photograph would have been around 1960. She died in 1963. And I remember her quite well. These are interesting. We tried to identify the people in some of these photographs a few years ago, but we weren't very successful. I don't know how clear the photographs are. But let me just point to the one in the bottom left, if you're facing it. And these guys are hanging out in a bar opposite where the 𝐂𝐸𝐠 used to live on Macrapo Street, and they're celebrating Notre Senora de Mons. And you see the oval shaped thing with the date in it. I think it's 15th of August, 1922. Joanna, if you can zoom on that. And there with their musical instruments, and you have 𝐶𝐶 𝐷eSilva there, you have the 𝐂𝐸𝐠 there. Old Man Quintal is not in that photograph. He's in the one above with the cars, and you look at the design on those cars, and you know that has to be around the first or the second decade of the 20th century. The one to the right, Old Man Quintal is there to the extreme left, he and his daughter in front, and 𝐂𝐸𝐾 over his shoulder, 𝐂𝐸𝐾 will have probably been around 9 at that time. And his name will turn up again just now. So, and some of the others there, the 𝐂𝐸𝐠 is there, and 𝐶𝐶 𝐷eSilva is there. That's as much as I can say about that one. And then the one to the bottom, again, Old Man Quintal is down in the front. If you're facing the photograph on the left-hand side, second to left, big guy with a white coat. And I'll mention other interests that his daughter, Auntie Hilda, I remember her saying that he had a bakery, and he had one of the very early bakeries in Trinidad on Coffee Street. And I remember his daughter, Auntie Hilda, saying that he was a strong guy. He used to be a wrestler at one point in time. And he was described as barrel-chested. And he would hold a 100-pound bag of flour against his chest and move it around in the bakery. That's the kind of guy he was. I'm being blocked from the top caption. But this was in 2010. This is my wife, Karen, Gabriella, and myself in Madeira. And that was one of the highlights of our life thus far. And the photograph with the three of us there eating was my first taste of garlic pork in Madeira. And this was in Funchal. And then there's Karen and myself below in downtown Funchal. I'm sure for the Madeirans among us, that will be a familiar scene. And then Karen and Gabriela with an image of Cristobal Colon, Columbus in Funchal. And then myself on the steps of the church in 𝐶𝐻, which is where I went and I met these guys at the little shop just across the road from here. So these are, I don't know, what's it about, 3 or 4 cousins or something. So, next slide. So we're almost down to the end now. Okay, so the determinants of the current characteristics after nearly 100 years. We started off with a relatively small comparative base of persons of Portuguese ancestry. The majority were up in the north, in the Portuguese area. Then you have people started to migrate to North Trinidad and abroad, including my family. And then there were earlier and later marriages among families from within and outside of San Fernando that were taking some of the married people out of San Fernando. There was also a high level of unions outside of original Portuguese migrant population in the San Fernando area, where people assimilated into the receptive population. There's a very low level of remaining persons of full Portuguese ancestry in San Fernando right now. I could hazard a guess because I would know them. It can't be much more than about 5. There are many, many persons of partial Portuguese ancestry with and without Portuguese surnames. And that has led to, resulted in some remaining friendships among grandchildren. So where I live here, 3 houses away from me, lives Alan 𝐿. And his grandfather, we have pictures of his grandfather and my grandfather, and you'll have seen some of them before, right? There's Mark Magalhães. Similarly, Roman Magalhães, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 Magalhães, he was from the mainland. We have pictures of them. He starred in one or 2 of the pictures earlier on. So the connections have remained, and people know who they are, particularly if they carry the Portuguese surname, they know who they are. There's Donna de Cairi. Donna has been very helpful to me. Donna is Alan's sister. There's the Xavier family. We still have connections. One of the Xavier girls, I will mention her name, Mary Xavier 𝐿. Mary she lives not too far from me in Palmis, in San Fernando. And she is from the Xavier family from Mons, who lived in Corinth. And most of that family, we speak about immigration, most of that family has migrated outside of San Fernando to North Trinidad. So, and the photograph below, interestingly, we talk about links and marriages and so on. So this is my sister's, my deceased sister's wedding in 1967 to Barry Gubaya. So the reason for this photograph is to show the linkages. So here you have, to the left of the photograph, is Saki Gubaya and Vera Franco Gubaya, 2 Portuguese names, families. And then on our side, so that's my mother and Uncle Sonny. So that's what, but this is intended to, Sonny being Sardina, right? My mother's brother, but it's intended to show the linkages, how 4 families come together here because of a marriage. And then what happens after that? This is perhaps the penultimate slide. The Paradise Cemetery is the most significant cemetery in San Fernando and in South Trinidad. And of all the Portuguese immigrants and Madeiran immigrants who came here from the 1890s to perhaps the 1920s, there are only 2 tombstones in this cemetery. And I am bold enough to say in South Trinidad with the place name Madeira mentioned. And I think that is important in terms of showing the continuity and the links from what you want to know. So one of them was John Relva, and John, he would have died, I can't make it out offhand here now, I think it was in the 1920s. And his wife was Mary Relva, who was from Demerara, similarly, just like Angela Cavallo and a few others. And then fairly recently, within this year, I made this plaque together with 2 others on a large family grave in Paradise Cemetery. The intention being to show that 𝐂𝐸𝐿 Quintal was born in Madeira in 1873. Right? So that's about it in terms of my presentation. I'd just like to briefly thank the people who helped me, the data sources. Rich Brown, my seventh cousin in the States. Candida da Silva, named after her father Candido. Yolanda da Silva, cousin. Auntie Hilda Durham, Quintal Durham, Donna de Kyries Glenn, Gertie Gomes, Diane de Freitas Lucky, my mother Rosa Sardina Quintal, Thelma Sardina Smith. The importance of oral tradition, other sources not necessarily fully documented, various state, church, immigration and cemetery records and archives, and the Madeira Archives and Library. And in closing, I would like to thank my wife, Karen, who's sitting on the side of me here right now, who you can't see, and my daughter, Gabriela, who is in Canada, and Gabriela is supposed to be on, for encouraging and supporting me in this effort, and who enjoyed Madeira just as much as I did. So that's about it. So thank you very much. I went on a bit too long, but thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Wayne. David Lionel Reis Pestana King. David is Bachelor of Communication, has a PG dip from UE. Another proud Pelican, served in several senior positions at IBM, BWI, and Republic Bank before establishing his own consulting company. He was a co-founder and president and first president of the Caribbean Association of Business Continuity Professionals. He's the sole author of many papers, articles, and presentations on business continuity planning. In sport, he served as the Honorary Assistant Secretary General of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, the President of the Trinidad and Tobago Paralympic Committee, and is the founder and first president of the Trinidad and Tobago Archery Federation. He's also served in charitable organizations, including as a member of the Homeless Poor Committee of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. He is the author of 5 novels of fiction and of Vavor, the biography of a Madeiran, which he will tell you about.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to share with you some of the experiences I've had with my Portuguese, my maternal grandparents. Okay, so these are my maternal grandparents. They are Maria Monica Reyes Pestana and Francisco Pestana. They are from Camará de Lobos. I have a small family tree here that shows the connection of my grandmother up here. And right, and her mother and therefore my grandparents and my great-grandparents and down the line, and we have seen some names that we have heard before in some of these, in this presentation. Okay, so my knowledge about Madeira is rooted in my experiences with my grandmother, who lived directly across the road from me. When I grew up, I had constant contact with her and my aunts. Okay. So in 1913, my grandfather, Francisco Pestana, who was 29 at the time, traveled to Trinidad. I believe he got employment at Camacho supermarket or grocery, and he lived modestly, saved, and bought property and set up a rum shop and a grocery on King and Abercrombie Street, which is the main 2 streets in that village. He purchased land in rural Marmoral and planted cocoa and citrus. And that, of course, and that was a tie back to the life he led in Madeira, as I understand it. They did have grapes. They did have a vineyard, and they grew grapes. but they were also interested in growing cork for the wine industry. So 1913 to beyond that was, of course, is that period where we had the Great War, which we now call the First World War. And after the First World War, Francisco returned to Madeira and married Maria Monica Pestana. 3 months later, they returned to Trinidad. This is their steamship ticket that was 6th of July 1921 is when they traveled from Madeira to Trinidad. You would note at the bottom the agent that sold them the ticket is De Freitas Martins, and we've seen some of those names here as well. The writing at the top, if you could see that, let me get this out of the way. Right. The writing at the top is in my grandmother's handwriting, and that would have been put there some years later because when she arrived in Trinidad, she did not read or write English. So that would have been added there sometime later. This is geographically where they settled in Trinidad, in the town of St. Joseph, which was the first capital of the country. And the location at the top, this square here, this is the location of the then governor's house. My grandfather had his house just across the road from him. Where's my cursor? Here, just across the road from that, that is where he set up his house. Down at the intersection of those two roads, Abercrombie and King Street, and fortuitous, the name of the street is King. My surname now. This is where he had his rum shop down there and a grocery across the road. And I believe my grandmother had her flower shop situated here. And this is the location of the Roman Catholic Church just across the street from his rum shop. And it'll be important to note that as we go along. So here we are. This is taken from my grandmother's book that she wrote about her experiences in her life. And it reads, ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to write, paint, or be a doctor. My parents disagreed. They said a woman should marry and have children. I got married and had 8 children. 5 died as babies and 3 are still alive. 1 son, 2 daughters, all over 50 now. I'm very friendly, love to travel. And I know that from a lot of stories I heard of my grandmother and her travel, her trips. She also loves history, languages, and meeting people. I have friends all over the world, no enemies, thank God. She was very quick to pick up languages. She worked with, I think, a French lady and in the flower shop, and I believe, and she picked up French. She also picked up a little German along the way. Of course, Spanish would have been something easy for her to learn because she lived in an English-speaking country. Then, of course, she picked up English by immersion. Okay, so enterprise and community. Maria Monica opened a flower shop and general shop in St. Joseph and was able to send her 2 daughters to boarding school in Grenada and built a house for herself and her 3 children in Mount Lambert. And Mount Lambert is just about 1 mile from St. Joseph, the town of St. Joseph. She knitted and crocheted and sold them to Woolworth in Port of Spain. And this was a source of income for her. And I remember visiting my grandmother several times. I mean, she lived just across the road. And I would go to see my grandmother. and she would be sitting, knitting or crocheting, and she would be talking to you and the hands are still going with the crochet hooks and so on, and out would come these lovely doilies and tablecloths and so on. She did very, very good work that she learned from her mother in Madeira. She sold the fruit from her backyard to her customers in Port of Spain. She would pick her fruit. She had avocado, mangoes, soursop, cherries growing in her backyard. And the avocado she had was not like the Mexican avocados, the small wrinkle-skinned ones. They were big, these huge product type avocados. And she would wrap them in some newspaper, put them in her bag, travel to Port of Spain, and she had places she went where people knew that she would be coming to sell her fruit and saw her come in. And I believe she might have met my wife before I did, because one of the places she went to is where my wife was working. She started a taxi service. Her son was one of those guys who she employed to drive a taxi for her. And I think she had about 2 or 3 vehicles and people drove the taxis for her. Francisco, my grandfather, immersed himself in his businesses. He imported an electrical generator and provided the first electric lights in St. Joseph. The rum shop opened late and people came from all over to see what a lit light bulb looks like. It was a novelty. He ran a wire across the road to the Roman Catholic Church, as we saw in the map earlier, and replaced their gas lamps with electric lights. And that continued for about 3 or 4 years, until the church acquired their own electrical generator and had their own lights. In 1952, Maria Monica Pestana was presented with her first grandchild and became Vovo. Now, this is what we called her since then. As I grew up, I was not the first grandchild, by the way. I was the second. And all my friends, all our friends and neighbors referred to her as Vovo. We going by Vovo and so on. So that name really stuck. 3 main things that was passed on to us from her Madeiran past, her Madeiran family. And that is, 1, the importance of family. She loved to have people come over and visit with her and the children around, whether we are in the yard or involved in mischief somewhere. The love of the land. She loved planting things, always outdoors, always in her garden. In the front, she had her roses. In the back, she had her fruit trees. And that is where she spent a lot of her time. So that is something she passed on to us. And of course, the food. We cannot not say that this is one of the things that have been passed to us. The importance of family. This is Bobo at 60 with her 4 grandchildren. And she loved to have us come over. And this was in the house we were living in across the road from her. This is our front porch where she sat there with us. And she always had this stern look on her when she took these pictures, that in all the black and white photos I have of her. Now, this is her at 87 with her 3 children. And there she is smiling finally. From left to right is Andrietta, my aunt, Vovo, and then the first child and eldest boy, and only boy, Lorenco, and then my mother, Andrietta. Okay, love of the land. This is her tending to her grapes. I remember when she returned from one of her trips to Madeira, she, unpacking her clothes, pulled out this vine, this root, it wasn't roots, this stem of a grapevine from her luggage, and that is what she planted in her backyard. She had some wire, pipe and wire put up in her backyard, created an arbor, and grew her grapes. These little seedless green, and I remember her sitting, pick a bunch, and we will come over and she'll use her little scissors that she used for her crochet, and she'll cut off a little piece with 4 and give it out to the grandchildren, and they were fantastic. Also in her backyard, the avocado, she got a pole made of bamboo, tied some wire at the front, cloth bag to catch the avocado so it wouldn't bruise, because she was to take it into town to sell it. Also, her mango tree beared lovely, lovely fruit for her. This is her in her front yard with her roses. She loved growing her roses and tended to them often, and was almost always liked to be outdoors. I'll also note that she was quite thrifty. She made her own clothing. This is a dress that she would have made for herself. She'd go into town and buy material and make her own clothing. The food, and I'm sure everybody would have guessed what the first item on the list would be, and that would be garlic pork. And that's the name that she would have referred to it as, Cavendish. And that was the main item on our Christmas menu. There was something called, we referred to in the family as Vovo cookies, because this is what she made throughout the year, especially at Christmas time. And this is the recipe that my wife wrote down from Bobo, telling her from Bobo's memory what the recipe is. And there are several recipes in this little piece of paper. And Joanne and I advocate and encourage everyone to talk to the elders, our elders who are still with us, and record our history, capture information like this, because without this, I would not have been eating bobo cookies this Christmas. Same with the garlic pork. Coconut sweetbread is something she loved to make. And these 3 items were the 3 items that were served Christmas morning at Vovo's house, where the family will all come and sit and have Christmas breakfast with her with these 3 items. Carnival time, we'd take a picnic down to the savannah, and she would make malasads for us to eat and serve it with honey. Hot cross buns at Easter time, and she would cut the top in with a scissors to make the cross. Madeira cake. I can still remember the bits of almond in the Madeira cake that she loved to make. And I'm beginning to get the urge to go make some of it myself. Bread pone, cassava pone, and what she called Sunday bread. All of that is in the list, all these pages here that my wife sat down and had and recorded from Bobo. Okay, she stayed connected as best she could with the Portuguese people. Here she is at her 80th birthday party, which she organized and hosted at her residence. In attendance was the Honorary Consul of Portugal, Mr. Gonzalez, and this was in 1982. And here she is at the University of the West Indies, interacting with teachers and the students in Portuguese. And you see the young man there has the microphone. They recorded her voice. They wanted to capture Madeiran Portuguese spoken by a native Madeiran. And she was happy to go along and do that. She died in December of 1996 at age 94. And this is an announcement that was placed in the newspaper and published in Quintal. And finally, a dream realized and a legacy remains. She wanted to write, and she did. She wrote this book, Memories, Tips, and Jokes, 1920 to 1984. She wrote it out in English. She went and found herself a printer and organized with the printer to design the cover and to print her little books. They are not very big. They are quite small. I was gifted one of them here that I have here, original and signed copy for me. So she was able to realize her dream of writing a book. She and Dr. Ferreira, Joan, collaborated to produce this entry to a magazine that was published in Portuguese in Madeira, I believe. Yeah. And then finally, my own publication about her life in some more detail, simply called 𝐂𝐸, the biography of a Madeiran. Thank you so much for allowing me to share some time with you and to share some of my family history with you all. Thank you very much.
So thank you everyone for staying, and the floor is open for any questions anyone has to ask that they feel that wasn't answered or talked about. So quick questions, everybody can put on their cameras. We'd love to see where you are and who you are. So this is a very informal time now. So feel free to put up your hand or just unmute and say anything. So Gary, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. And I want to say this was a incredible presentation. And thank you, Joanne, for putting this together. And I want to thank everyone, all the presenters too. And some books were mentioned, and but I got this one.
Hey, David.
You can see the book. It's a great book.
Yeah.
And
the
tips and you can see the size difference. They're great books. I'll reread the books because I think I'll pick up a little bit more. And of course, I got this one here too.
Thank you.
I have this one here too, but just a couple quick. I have a question for you, Joanne, but I want to mention a couple things. My connection here is my grandparents were from 𝐂𝐸𝐿, 𝐂𝐸𝐬𝐬𝐿, and my grandmother was Georgina Xavier, and so I've got a lot of Xaviers in my family tree. In fact, my grandmother's grandfather fathered 18 children. And his first wife had 11 children and died. He married someone younger. They had 2 children, and she died after her second child was born. Then he married again and had 5 more children. So that creates an interesting family tree section. The oldest of the 18 children was Augustino Francisco Xavier, who went to British Guiana, then went to Trinidad. And then there's other Xaviers I went over. My grandmother was born in actually Sao Paulo, Brazil. Her parents went to Brazil in 1898 with their 4 children, and they worked on a coffee plantation because slavery ended in March 1888. And lo and behold, 2 years after, my grandmother was born there on a coffee plantation, and eventually they came back. I went to Madeira this past June for the first time. Spent 9 days there, a lot of memories, a lot of time in 𝐂𝐸𝐿. talked with a priest there, did a lot of walking where the cemetery used to be, and learned a lot about the area. The question I have for you, Joanna, is in your presentation, I think it was on the slide had 33 and 34 at the bottom, and you know about this. You talked about the percentage of people that came to Trinidad from different parishes, and 𝐂𝐸 was 14.8%. And you had two slides on that. One was a pie chart, and the other was data. My question is, what time period did that cover for that 14.8%? What year to what year?
That was the 1890s to 1975. Unfortunately, I can give you the exact date, but it's the 1890s to 1975 because we don't have information for anything from the early 1834 and 1846. This was when records started to be kept in Port of Spain, and that's the documentation I've had access to so far. So I don't know if that helps. Yes. Next time I'll put the dates. But I can send you my whole thesis, but it's too many pages, so I just extracted that and completely forgot the dates. So wonderful history yourself, David. I hope you can come to Trinidad one day, and that'll be. Sorry, Gary. Why am I saying David? Because you held up two of David's books. So thank you for sharing, Gary. Any other questions or comments?
I went to Trinidad once in 2008 on a cruise stop, and I wish I knew what I know now, because I would have seen Nisha and a lot of other family members there. So
you're young. You can come back. You can come back. We'd be happy to have you. Hey, cousin Stephen, how are you? You want to say anything?
Cousin Joanna, it is such a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, thank you very much for inviting me, Cousin Joanne. It's really a pleasure. I love to hear these stories and learn about the diaspora of the Madeiran people. Just to let you know, this week I was able to find some more cousins in Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And I'm very much looking forward to being in contact with them through a very strange connection in France, who's married to descendants of the De Freitas. So I'm able to now add them into my tree and hopefully connect with them very soon, and one day visit them in Madeira.
Well, when you organize the big Mexico reunion, give me a year's notice and I will be there.
Oh, very good. Will do.
Thank you for coming. Anybody else want to say anything? Hi, Kate. Hi, Roma, everybody. Anybody else wants to ask any questions? Comments, anything? Roma, I see you had some comments. You can just unmute. Jillian, Heidi, y'all wanted to say something?
I think Manuel is trying.
Manuel is trying to say something.
Okay, let Roma go and then Manuel. Roma? Roma is from our National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago.
All the stories I'm hearing, and I would love to have some of them documented. Permission, you can contact me to make sure your stories are people of Portuguese descent can be inspired as well, and know that it is possible to trace their roots to Madeira and other areas.
And maybe one thing we can do is maybe have a small meeting at the archives at some point and see how we can go forward.
Share those stories, because family history is very popular at the National Archives, and we do get people coming in to trace their family roots. And thanks to Joanne, we have the passport indices that people can use to help trace their roots. And of course, Joanne is always available for any assistance when I reach out to her. So yes, Joanne, I would really appreciate if you could maybe continue and make sure it's documented, because it's important that as a National Archive, we document the communities that have contributed to Trinidad and Tobago. So we will continue to build to these collections. Thanks to Joanne, she's already donated some other books as well as some postcards. And she has been integral in promoting family history when we have family sessions at the National Archive. So
maybe
I really encourage all these lovely stories. And even with San Fernando, I mean, I learned a lot today from Wayne about that Madeirans and coming from Guyana as well. So I need to maybe capture some of that history of the Guyanese connections as well.
so maybe we can also organize a link with the archives of Madeira as well, and
So that will be wonderful.
and have a virtual session and see how we could support each other. But just giving kudos to Roma and Avril Belfort. They have been amazing in terms of all their support and insights, and anything you need that they can help with, they will be helping. So thank you very much, Roma. And enjoy the Lupino function. And Manuel, where's Manuel?
Hi everyone, and let me just wish everyone a season greetings and Merry Christmas one time, okay?
Feliz Natal.
Feliz Natal. Peace.
Hi, Joanne. The reason why I have to leave now because I've got a meeting at 5 o'clock, and I just wanted to say something as follows. First of all, to thank you for the invitation. Secondly, it was such a wonderful time being here by you, listening to everyone. I just cannot, I have no words to express myself, right? Thirdly, I want us to say that in regard to that last time that we worked together in the COVID times, things has gone further and further. What's happening lately is that the teachers of history of School of Madeira transmitted to the kids from the schools, and they are asking me to go personally to schools and speak to them personally. And this has been very, very interesting for me. I've been to about 5 schools already. And I've got other projects going on with my story, which is 13 years old already since I started in the Center of Studies History of Madeira, like you know. And it's such a wonderful to see and how Madeira is so small, and they are everywhere in the world. Every little point we are there. So it's so nice, and I cannot say, like I told you, I don't have any words to say. I thank you for doing this, so we can get together. It's like being next door to us, and we are so far away, and this is incredible. Joanne, I'm so happy. And I really wanted to speak more, but there's no time because everybody has to have a turn to talk. But I want to wish you, your family, and all our diaspora in Tobago and all over the world. I want to send a big hug from Madeira to each and every one of us. Okay? God bless you all. Thank you so much.
God bless you so much, and thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing our heart. And I think we all feel the same way, that we're united by much more than the sea. Let's not think of the seas and the oceans as dividing us. Let's think of them as uniting us, because it was the same seas that brought Madeira to Trinidad. And it might be airspace now taking us back to Madeira, but it's been wonderful to see everybody. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions, comments, reactions. Feel free to speak. Shelley, you want to say something?
Hi. I'm a member of the St. Anne's Presbyterian Church community, and unfortunately, I missed part of what you were saying about our church. So I wanted to know if the recording would be available afterwards so that I could listen to that bit.
Yes, it will be. We might have to edit some of it in terms of the length of it, but it will be. And just to say that Jacinto Claudio, who spoke earlier, I don't know if you heard him. I don't know if he's still here. Is he still here? Yeah, he's one of the people from the church in Funchal. And those of you who've been to Madeira will have seen a plaque outside remembering the trip that the Presbyterians made to come to found the St. Anne's Church of Scotland. So I'm glad we have a Trini representative.
Yeah, I didn't understand all that he said. Will it be translated?
I will try my best.
Thank you.
We have some closed captioning, and I don't think will work because I have it in English, and I didn't really organize any interpreting because I wasn't sure who wanted to speak in what language. But I'll definitely be able to get some subtitles both ways to just at least capture a summary or the essence of what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Because I think it's as I say, it's also on the other side that not everybody understands English and not everybody understands Portuguese. So thank you very much. Heidi, want to say anything?
Yes, I just wanted to say hi. Thank you so much to everybody who spoke. Thank you, Dr. Joanne, for organizing all of this. I think you did very well with the tech. You did much better than I could have even. So just to everybody who took the time to come out and listen, it's amazing. And I do hope to bring the youth in the future to more events and to be more involved. I think my goal, and Dr. Joanne's as well, is just to kind of keep the culture alive. And yeah,
bring the children, bring the children.
Bring the children. Correct.
Thank you very much, Heidi. José Gonçalves, queria dizer mais alguma coisa?
Say that I'm really emotionally, it's a great evening, in this case in Belgium, it's already evening for me. It was fantastic. Thank you very, very much to have given me the opportunity of participating in such an important event. I congratulate you. I want to congratulate you once more, and also to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence. It really, really means a lot. Very important to us. So I guess finally, I just want to say on behalf of the director of the Madeiran communities, Dr. José Sancho Gonçalves Gomes, and the entire Conselho da Diaspora Madeirense, and all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and all of our friends and relatives here, and future friends, maybe even future relatives, I don't know. Thank you to everybody. It's been really important for us, and I hope that this is the first step in the march towards our bicentenary, and that by the year 2000, Lord, in the next 10 years, in 2034, that maybe some more of us might speak Portuguese. Maybe we can organize a trip to Madeira. That would be very exciting, and have something on a grand scale. And the 190th won't end until next year. So I still hope that we can do something on a national scale, because I think, honestly, we got more attention from the Madeira newspapers. I mean, I honestly wasn't able to reach out to our national newspapers, but we can still do things at a national level, because we pride ourselves on diversity. We pride ourselves on a rich tapestry of our history, and I think this is a very, very important part of who we are, and we must not forget. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day, and God bless you and your families. Beijinhos, abraços, obrigado por tudo, obrigado Deus, e a paz do Senhor. So, and there goes the TNT flag. So,
thank you so much, Joanne.
Thanks, Jillian. Thanks for all the support. You all take care.
Obrigado.
While the music is playing, you know, see our boat is jumping louder. I jump for a bar with the very number to break down the heart. Say, with the bar, after pitching below, you know, and the good and the good, you know, I'm in the boat, I come on the program, when I put while the music is playing, you know, see our boat is jumping louder. I jump for a bar with the very number to break down the heart. Say, with the bar, after pitching below, you know, and the good and the good, you know, I'm in the boat, I come on the program, everybody is by a one thing Papa Tika, to play a Portuguese rumba. While the people dancing, he will see a Portuguese drinking water. I tip for a pass with the very number to break down the heart of the mini bar. lover's power. Well, I keep a Portuguese mama telling me, Quintal, I love you to see what I'm going to do, Lord. Do let us dance. Oh, I want to romance, mama. Please have a care. You want to touch me with the goose flare, it's the very fire. That's the baby below you. And the gold and the lulu, you. Oh, you please, Madeira, if I tell you I get a pleasure, I was not a fool. When I got on the one from the goal, but the challenge people call it so. It's a long thing they call me King Ferreira. Jump for a part, with very number to break on my heart when they pull the lul. When they pull, when they lul, when they pull, when they fall.